In the lobby of a grand hotel, a black woman faces open humiliation from the front desk clerk. The crowd watches, some silent, some whispering, as arrogance clashes with quiet dignity. The tension builds toward an unseen twist that promises the tables will turn. "We don't serve people like you here. Try someplace cheaper down the street." The words cut through the polished air of the hotel lobby like a shard of glass. Heads turned. A few gasps escaped. Others simply froze, pretending to check their phones. As if silence could shield them from the ugliness on display. The speaker was Kyle, the young front desk clerk with a gelled haircut and a smirk that looked rehearsed. His voice carried with the arrogance of someone certain no consequence would ever touch him. The woman standing before him, Alicia, didn't flinch. She was elegant, dressed in a simple black dress and a light blazer. Nothing about her seemed out of place in the marble-floored lobby, with its chandeliers glittering overhead and fountains whispering in the corners. And yet, by Kyle's tone, she was being treated as if she had wandered into a place that didn't belong to her. "Excuse me?" Alicia's voice was calm, steady, so steady it unsettled those listening. Kyle leaned forward across the counter. "You heard me. We're fully booked." "But even if we weren't..." He let the sentence hang, his smirk widening as he gave her a deliberate up-and-down glance. "This hotel has standards." A man standing in line behind Alicia muttered, "That's not right." His wife tugged at his arm, whispering, "Don't get involved." The marble clock on the wall ticked loudly, filling the silence that followed. Every tick seemed to mark the weight of humiliation settling over the room. Alicia straightened her posture. Her eyes were sharp now, but she didn't raise her voice. "So you're saying I can't have a room here? Even though I made a reservation weeks ago?" Kyle clicked around on his computer with exaggerated slowness. "Reservation, huh? Let me check." He paused, tapping a few keys before shaking his head in mock sympathy. "Nope, don't see your name here." "Maybe you made a mistake." "Happens all the time." The words carried a venom everyone understood. The implication wasn't that she'd made a mistake. It was that she wasn't worthy of being in the system at all. Alicia placed her phone on the counter, sliding it toward him. On the glowing screen was the confirmation email, her name in bold letters, the hotel's logo unmistakable. Kyle didn't even glance at it. He pushed it back toward her with one finger, as though touching it was beneath him. "Anyone can fake an email. Doesn't change the fact you don't belong here." Murmurs rippled through the lobby now. A bellboy carrying luggage slowed his pace, eyes darting between Alicia and Kyle. A family sitting in the waiting area shifted uncomfortably, their children staring wide-eyed at the tension adults were trying to ignore. Still, Alicia remained composed. "I suggest you look again." Kyle laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed beneath the chandelier. "Lady, do you really think raising your voice is going to change anything? I run this desk. I decide who gets keys and who doesn't. And trust me, people like you don't get them." The words "people like you" seemed to hang heavier than the chandelier itself. Alicia's hands tightened around the strap of her handbag, but her expression remained unshaken. Then came another voice, older, firmer. From across the lobby, the assistant manager, a woman in a gray suit, approached. "Kyle, what's going on here?" Kyle straightened, suddenly polite. "Oh, nothing, Ms. Richards, just sorting out a little confusion." "Confusion?" Alicia repeated, her tone as precise as a scalpel. "Your employee told me I don't belong here. He refused to honor my confirmed reservation. And he did it loudly enough for everyone in this lobby to hear." The manager's face stiffened. For a moment, it seemed she might intervene. But then her eyes flicked to Kyle, then to the guests watching, and she hesitated. Her lips parted, then closed again. She looked away. Silence. That silence of institutional complicity, the kind where injustice survives because it is easier to look away. Kyle smirked again, emboldened. See? Even she knows. You're not getting a room here. The air thickened with tension. Some guests looked ashamed, others intrigued, but no one stepped forward. Alicia, however, simply smiled. It was small, almost imperceptible, but powerful in its calm. She leaned forward just slightly, her voice soft but steady. Are you certain about that? Her question wasn't a plea. It was a warning, though no one in the room yet understood why. The clock ticked. Again. 1, 2, 3. The silence before the storm. The tick of the grand clock echoed again. Kyle leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, smirk still plastered across his face. He thought the game was over. He thought he had won, but Alicia's question, "Are you certain about that?" lingered in the air like smoke. It rattled him, though he didn't dare show it. "Yeah, I'm certain," Kyle said finally, his tone dripping arrogance. "You're not getting a key card tonight." Simple as that. Across the lobby, whispers had begun to stir. A businessman in a navy suit muttered to his colleague, "She showed him the reservation. Why's he refusing?" His colleague shook his head. "Don't get involved. Hotels don't like troublemakers." Alicia stood taller now, her calmness radiating in stark contrast to Kyle's smug bravado. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she spoke clearly enough for the entire lobby to hear. Funny thing about certainty, it has a way of shattering when truth steps into the room. The bellboy, still clutching a set of luggage, froze mid-step. His eyes widened. Something in Alicia's tone was different, like a person used to command, not plead. Kyle chuckled mockingly. "Oh, please, truth? This is my desk. My rules. And right now, the truth is, you don't belong in this hotel." The word belong rang out like a slap. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. One woman pulled her child closer, as if shielding him from the ugliness of the scene. From behind, an elderly couple exchanged glances. The husband whispered, "Isn't that discrimination?" The wife sighed, "Yes. But look around. No one's stopping it." Alicia took one small step forward, closing the space between herself and the counter. Her eyes locked onto Kyle's, unwavering. "You're making a mistake." "A very big mistake." Kyle's smirk flickered. Just for a second. But then he scoffed. "Lady, the only mistake here is you thinking you can force your way into a place you don't fit." The assistant manager, Ms. Richards, lingered a few feet away. Her hands fidgeted with a clipboard, her eyes darting to the guests, then back to Alicia. Every part of her posture screamed discomfort, but still she said nothing. Silence can be as loud as cruelty. And in that silence, the hotel itself seemed complicit. Alicia scanned the faces in the lobby, the guests pretending not to see, the employees pretending not to hear. Her voice, though calm, carried a weight that pierced through their collective cowardice. "Every person watching this," she said evenly, "remembers what they saw. They remember the silence just as much as the words." A ripple went through the room. A few people lowered their eyes. Others shifted in shame. Kyle rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, here we go. The speech. You people love speeches. Well, save it. No one here is going to back you up." But his words no longer landed with the same confidence. His voice cracked slightly on "you people." He knew, somewhere deep down, he had overplayed his hand, and then the doors of the hotel lobby swung open. A gust of evening air rushed in, carrying the faint scent of rain. Two men in dark suits entered, walking with crisp precision, their presence commanding immediate attention. They weren't guests. They weren't staff. They were something else. The crowd parted instinctively, whispering. Even Kyle's smirk faltered as the men walked straight toward Alicia. "Ma'am," one of them said respectfully, nodding his head slightly. Your driver is waiting outside. Do you need us to escort you? The entire lobby froze. Gasps fluttered through the air. The bellboy nearly dropped the luggage he was holding. Kyle blinked, confusion twisting his expression. Wait, your driver? Alicia didn't look at him. She simply gave the suited men a nod. Yes, tell him I'll be ready shortly. I'm just finishing something here. The men stepped back, taking position near the door guards unmistakably. The room's energy shifted in an instant. Where once Alicia had seemed like just another guest, now she radiated an aura of authority. Whispers turned into low murmurs. Who is she? Did you see the way they spoke to her? She has bodyguards? Kyle swallowed hard, but forced out a laugh. Nice act. You hired a couple guys to play dress-up, huh? Cute trick. Doesn't change anything. You're not staying here. But his voice no longer carried the same certainty. His smirk was thinner now, brittle at the edges. Alicia finally turned back to him, her eyes cool and unshaken. She spoke softly, but every syllable cut through the marble air. Are you absolutely certain about that, Mr. Clerk? The question wasn't just for him anymore, it was for the entire lobby. And the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. The air in the lobby felt heavier now, as if the glittering chandeliers had dimmed under the weight of what just happened. Every guest was no longer pretending to be distracted. Every eye was fixed on Alicia. The two suited men stood near the entrance, silent but commanding, their presence making even the bellboy straighten his posture nervously. Kyle, however, refused to back down. His pride wouldn't let him. His jaw clenched as he leaned across the counter again, voice louder than before. You think hiring a couple of bodyguards is going to scare me? I don't care who you pretend to be. This is my hotel desk. And I said no. The words bounced off the marble walls, sharp and defiant. But beneath them, a tremor of doubt was beginning to surface. Guests murmured louder now. Bodyguards don't treat just anyone like that. She must be important. Why isn't management stepping in? Ms. Richards, the assistant manager, lingered in the background like a statue. Her lips were pressed tight, her clipboard clutched to her chest. Her silence was deafening. Alicia's eyes swept the room calmly, reading every face, every flicker of discomfort. Then she returned her gaze to Kyle. Her voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the lobby. This isn't about a room, is it? This is about me, Kyle scoffed. Don't play the victim card. You're just not a fit for this place. End of story. But even as he said it, the words rang hollow. The guests heard the lie, tasted it in the air. A woman near the waiting lounge whispered to her husband, "She does have a reservation." He saw the email. Her husband shook his head. He doesn't care. That's the point. The tension spread like fire. The crowd wasn't just watching now, they were choosing sides in their silence. Alicia took a deep breath, her calmness almost regal. You're right about one thing, Kyle, she said softly. This is your desk, and every word you've spoken here is your choice. You'll live with it. Her words weren't angry. They were prophetic. Kyle's smirk faltered, just for a flicker of a second. Don't try to threaten me. You're not in charge here. The bellboy shifted uneasily. He looked at Alicia, then at Kyle, then back again. Finally he spoke up, his voice timid but audible. Sir, maybe we should just check the system again? Her email looked real. Kyle snapped at him instantly. Stay out of it. You don't tell me how to do my job. The boy lowered his eyes, shame coloring his face. Alicia, however, gave him a small, warm nod of gratitude. The kind that acknowledged courage, no matter how small. Courage, she murmured just loud enough for him to hear. Never forget this moment. The boy blinked, surprised, before shuffling back to his post. Meanwhile, Kyle turned to the assistant manager, his voice sharp. "Ms. Richards, you're just gonna stand there? You see what's happening? Back me up here?" Ms. Richards hesitated. Her throat tightened as she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kyle, maybe we should process her check-in quietly, before this becomes bigger." The words were weak, but they were words nonetheless. Kyle spun toward her, eyes blazing. "Bigger? Don't you see? People like her." He stopped himself mid-sentence, realizing too late how much he had revealed. The room gasped collectively. Alicia tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "Finish your sentence." Kyle's face flushed red. "I don't have to explain myself to you." The suited men near the door took one step forward in unison. Their presence was a silent thunderclap, and the entire lobby stiffened. Alicia raised her hand gently, signaling them to stop. Her authority was unquestionable now. The guards obeyed instantly, returning to their stillness. The guests murmured again, this time louder. She gave them a signal. They obeyed immediately. "Who is this woman?" Kyle slammed his palm on the counter. "Enough of this circus. You're not getting a room. I don't care who you bring in here, or what little game you're playing." The clock on the wall ticked again. Tick, tick, tick. Alicia leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but in the silence of the lobby, everyone heard it. "Then I suppose it's time to remind you. Who owns this place?" The room erupted in stunned gasps. Kyle froze, eyes wide. Miss Richards' clipboard slipped from her hands and clattered onto the marble floor. The truth hadn't fully landed yet, but the tremor had begun, and when it landed, nothing in this hotel would ever be the same. The marble lobby had never felt so alive with silence. Every chandelier seemed frozen in mid-glitter. Every fountain in the corners whispered quieter than usual, as if the entire building leaned closer to hear what Alicia had just said. "Then I suppose it's time to remind you. Who owns this place?" The words hung like a thundercloud, heavy and impossible to ignore. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests looked at one another, wide-eyed. Ms. Richards bent down to snatch her fallen clipboard, her trembling fingers betraying her fear. Kyle's face contorted into disbelief. He laughed, but it was nervous, unsteady. "What? You? Own this hotel? Don't make me laugh. You're just bluffing to save face." But no one laughed with him. The air had shifted. The smirk he wore no longer fit the scene. Alicia didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply adjusted the strap of her handbag and spoke in that same steady tone. "Bluffs are for gamblers. I don't gamble with what's already mine." Her words carried such certainty that even the chandeliers seemed to tremble. The suited men by the entrance exchanged a glance but remained silent, hands folded in front of them. Their calm presence only amplified the truth everyone was slowly beginning to accept. From the waiting lounge, a tourist whispered, "She doesn't look like she's lying." Another leaned forward. "No one with guards like that would bother bluffing." "Think about it." Kyle's voice cracked with frustration. "Don't believe her. She's just trying to intimidate us. If she was the owner, she'd have proof." Alicia smiled faintly. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the calm smile of someone who already knew how the story would end. "Proof?" she said, tilting her head. "I carry it everywhere I go. Not on paper. Not in emails. In the very foundation of this building. Every corner knows my name, even if you pretend you don't." Her eyes swept the ceiling, the marble pillars, the polished floor, as if the hotel itself stood witness to her words. Kyle shook his head violently, panic seeping into his movements. "This is insane. Ms. Richards, tell her she's lying. Tell everyone she's nothing more than a guest trying to stir trouble." But Ms. Richards couldn't. Her lips parted, her eyes darting nervously, but no words came. The truth was pressing against her silence, demanding release. Alicia stepped closer to the desk. The crowd parted slightly as if the sheer weight of her presence pushed them aside. She laid her hand gently on the marble counter, the same counter Kyle had used as a weapon of humiliation just minutes ago. Hotel was built on principles of dignity, respect, and excellence, she said softly. Principles you've trampled under your arrogance. You thought no one was watching, but the walls always listen. And tonight, so do the people. Her voice wasn't raised, yet the room felt shaken. Kyle slammed the desk with his palm, desperate to regain control. No, you're not the owner. Owners don't just walk in unannounced and line up like regular guests. You're lying. The bellboy, who had been silent since Kyle silenced him earlier, suddenly spoke again, this time with more strength. Sir, I've seen her picture, he said, his voice trembling but clear. In the staff training packet. In the office upstairs. She's the owner. The room erupted in gasps. Kyle spun around, furious. What are you talking about? The boy swallowed hard, standing his ground. It's true. We were told during orientation. Her name's Alicia Johnson. She inherited the chain 2 years ago. Eyes turned back to Alicia, whose calm expression confirmed everything. Kyle's face drained of color. His smirk collapsed completely, replaced by a mask of disbelief. No, this isn't real. Alicia leaned closer, her voice low enough to sound intimate, but loud enough for everyone to hear. It's very real. And in exactly 9 minutes, you'll wish you had treated me with the respect you owe every guest who walks through these doors. The clock on the wall ticked again. 9 minutes. The countdown had begun. The marble clock above the desk ticked with a new weight. 8 minutes left. The bellboy's trembling confession had cracked the silence wide open. Now the whispers rolled through the lobby like waves crashing against a shore. Guests leaned closer to one another, their voices hushed but urgent. She's really the owner? Why would he treat her like that if she was? This is about to get ugly. Kyle's face was red, his chest heaving. His once practiced smirk had dissolved into a sneer of desperation. He jabbed a finger at Alicia. Don't listen to her. She's spinning lies to humiliate me. None of this makes sense. But his words carried no conviction. He sounded less like a man in control and more like one clinging to the last threads of authority slipping through his fingers. Alicia stood calm, unmoved by the storm he tried to stir. Her hands were steady at her sides, her posture regal against the chaos. 8 minutes, she said quietly, her gaze fixed on Kyle. That's all the time you have left to decide what kind of man you want to be remembered as. Her words struck deeper than a shout could have. Even the children sitting on the lobby couches fell silent, sensing the gravity in her tone. Kyle laughed bitterly. Remembered? You think anyone's going to care about this little scene tomorrow? Guests will forget. Staff will move on. That's how it works. But no one looked away. Not a single person. Every eye was locked on him and Alicia. His own co-workers stared, shame written across their faces. 7 minutes. The suited men by the door checked their watches discreetly. Their stillness was louder than Kyle's shouting. They weren't bodyguards trying to intimidate. They were professionals waiting for a signal. Miss Richards finally broke her silence, stepping forward. Kyle, please, stop this. She's telling the truth. I've seen the ownership papers myself. Her name is everywhere in the system. Kyle turned on her viciously. And you said nothing? You let this play out? Her voice cracked with guilt. I was afraid. Her confession carried through the lobby, hanging heavy in the air. Guests murmured again, disgust weaving into their whispers. Afraid? She's your boss. This whole place is rotten. Alicia's eyes softened briefly as she looked at Ms. Richards, not with anger, but with disappointment. Fear is what allows men like him to believe they can humiliate without consequence. Alicia said, her voice carrying both sadness and strength. But silence is never neutral. Silence sides with the oppressor. The guests stirred, their shame now mixed with a strange sense of relief that someone was finally saying aloud what they all felt. Kyle slammed his fist on the counter. Enough of this nonsense. You're not the owner, and if you were, why would you be standing here like some nobody? Owners don't wait in line. Owners don't. Owners listen, Alicia interrupted sharply. Her voice cut through his rant like a blade. Owners see. Owners make sure the people at the top never forget that dignity belongs to everyone who walks through these doors. That's why I stand here, because tonight, you made this lobby a theater of humiliation. Her calmness thundered louder than Kyle's. Shouting. 6 minutes. The clock ticked again, and the sound reverberated through every marble vein in the room. The countdown was no longer just about time. It was about inevitability. Kyle's eyes darted around the lobby, searching for support. But the crowd that had once been silent now stared at him with condemnation. The businessman in the navy suit shook his head. The elderly couple frowned openly. Even the children whispered, "He's in trouble." Kyle's arrogance began to collapse into panic. This is a setup. You all think she's powerful? She's lying to you. No one's gonna fire me over this. 5 minutes. Alicia's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. You still believe your job is yours to protect. But in 5 minutes, you'll learn it never belonged to you. It belonged to the dignity you chose to ignore. Her words pierced him. For the first time, Kyle had no retort. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The lobby grew still again, the murmurs replaced by the relentless ticking of the clock. 4 minutes. The bellboy clutched his luggage cart tighter, his young face caught between fear and awe. He whispered, almost to himself, she warned him. The countdown continued. Every tick of the clock felt like thunder in the veins of the teens of the hotel. Every second closer to justice. You saw what happened, didn't you? A guest whispered as she leaned toward another in the lounge. Heads nodded. Whispers traveled like sparks through dry grass. The air in the hotel lobby was no longer one of luxury and ease. It had thickened, heavy with unease. Conversations paused whenever the manager strutted past, trying too hard to appear in control. But the cracks were showing. The black woman, still standing with her luggage by the polished counter, said nothing. Her silence carried more weight than 100 angry words could have. She was calm, but there was something unsettling about her stillness, something that made people watch, waiting. The manager cleared his throat loudly, pretending not to notice the sidelong glances. People always want a show, he muttered under his breath, pacing. He glanced toward the front desk clerks, who avoided his eyes. They had served under his arrogance for years, but tonight their loyalty faltered. 2 bellboys exchanged a look by the elevators. One whispered, "Man, did you see the way she held herself? Like she belongs here more than anyone." The other replied softly, "I think she does." And he has no clue. The receptionist, the young woman with trembling hands, sat rigid behind the counter. She could still feel the shame of refusing a room minutes earlier, the echo of the woman's steady gaze burning into her conscience. She hadn't wanted to say those words, but fear of the manager's wrath had sealed her lips. Now guilt gnawed at her chest. At a nearby table, a businessman in a gray suit closed his laptop and leaned toward his companion. "That wasn't just rude," he whispered. "That was dangerous. If she's somebody important, this whole place is in trouble." The whispers began threading together into a collective murmur. Guests from the bar drifted closer, pretending to admire the chandelier or check their phones, but their eyes flicked repeatedly toward the luggage, the calm woman, and the sweating manager. The manager finally snapped. He slammed his palm against the desk. "Enough gawking. This is a hotel, not a circus." The sudden outburst silenced the room, but only for a moment. Then, like a wave, the murmurs rose again, softer but more determined, as though his desperation had confirmed what they suspected. Something was wrong, very wrong. The black woman finally shifted. She placed her hand gently on the handle of her suitcase, her nails tapping once against the metal. The sound was small, but it cut through the noise like a bell. All eyes turned to her. She lifted her chin, looked around the lobby, and gave the faintest smile. Not smug, not bitter, just patient. The manager's jaw tightened. That smile frightened him more than open defiance ever could. "What are you waiting for?" he barked, though his voice trembled. "You've been told this hotel isn't for—" He stopped. He could feel every pair of eyes drilling into his back, even those of his own staff. His words, once a weapon, now felt like a noose tightening around his neck. From the corner, a child tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mama," he said innocently, "why won't they let her stay?" "She looks nice." The mother hushed him quickly, but it was too late. The simple question hung in the air like a judgment heavier than any law. The woman's calm eyes swept across the lobby once more, meeting gaze after gaze. People looked away, ashamed, uncomfortable. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't spoken a word, but the atmosphere was shifting. And then a quiet laugh broke the silence. Not from her, but from an older guest sitting in the corner, a man with silver hair and a cane. He shook his head slowly. "Arrogance always forgets its own shadow," he said, almost to himself, but loud enough for many to hear. The manager flushed red. He straightened his tie, but sweat clung to his forehead. His power was slipping. He could feel it. The black woman let the silence deepen again before finally speaking, her voice low, even, and impossible to ignore. "I was waiting," she said, "to see if anyone here had the courage to do the right thing." Her words lingered in the air, pressing against the walls, against the people who had stood frozen in silence. The guests shifted uncomfortably. The staff avoided her gaze, and then her phone buzzed. She reached into her bag, glanced at the screen, and a spark of amusement touched her lips. Without another word, she began to walk slowly toward the grand staircase, each step deliberate, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The manager called after her, "Hey, you can't just—" But his voice faltered as she turned her head slightly, her eyes gleaming with a promise he couldn't yet understand. The whispers erupted again, louder than before. The tide had turned. And though no one knew it yet, the next few minutes would change everything inside that hotel. The lobby felt different now. The chandelier's glow no longer gave warmth it through long shadows, making the marble floor look cold and cracked. The hum of whispered conversations had grown into a low buzz that no one could ignore. The black woman paused midway up the staircase, her phone still in hand. The light from the screen reflected faintly against her calm face. She didn't hurry. She didn't need to. Every move she made carried weight. The manager's voice broke the tension. "Everyone back to your rooms." He barked, his command ringing false. He tried to summon the authority he once wielded so easily, but his words bounced uselessly against the walls. Not a single guest moved. Instead, someone laughed softly. Another muttered, "He's scared." The manager spun, eyes narrowing, but he couldn't find the source. His confidence wavered further, like a man standing on ice that groaned beneath his weight. By the counter, the young receptionist fiddled with a pen, her hands shaking. She whispered to the colleague beside her, "She knows something." "You can see it." The colleague nodded, his lips thin and pale. "I think we're finished if the truth comes out." The black woman reached the landing and turned, resting one hand on the gleaming rail. She looked down over the crowd below, guests, staff, and the furious manager pacing like a trapped animal. Her voice was calm, steady, but it cut through every murmur. "You want silence," she said. eyes on the manager. But silence doesn't last forever. Gasps rose from the guests. Some shifted closer to hear more, sensing the storm about to break. The manager puffed his chest, though sweat glistened along his hairline. "You don't scare me," he spat. "This is my hotel. I decide who stays and who doesn't. People like you." He stopped short. Even he knew he had said too much already. His words lingered in the air like smoke, choking every ear that heard them. The older man with the cane, still seated in the corner, tapped it once against the marble. "Careful," he warned, his voice calm but edged. "Walls here." And so do reputations. A woman at the bar whispered to her friend, "He doesn't even realize how bad this looks." "She's not angry. She's waiting." The black woman lowered her phone, sliding it gently into her purse. Her faint smile returned, enough to send another ripple of unease across the room. She didn't shout, didn't accuse, she only observed. And in that silence, the manager's power collapsed a little more. Then came the sound that shattered his fragile control. The grand doors of the hotel swung open. Two sharply dressed men entered, security uniforms crisp, their movements precise. They weren't ordinary guards. They carried themselves with a quiet authority, scanning the room in seconds. The manager rushed forward, relief in his tone. "Finally, remove her from the premises immediately." But the guards didn't move toward her. They stopped instead at the base of the staircase, eyes lifting toward the woman on the landing. One of them gave a small, respectful nod. The lobby erupted in whispers again. The manager froze. "What are you doing?" "I said get her out." The guards didn't flinch. The taller one spoke, his voice even but firm. "Sir, we don't take orders from you." The words hit harder than any shout. Gasps swept the lobby. Guests leaned forward, staff stiffened, and the manager's face drained of color. The black woman's calm gaze never wavered. She simply said, "Thank you for coming." The entire lobby seemed to stop breathing. Who was she? Why did security bow to her? And why was the arrogant manager suddenly looking smaller, weaker, more desperate by the second? The woman stepped down one stair, heels clicking like a metronome of doom. 9 minutes, she said softly, her voice reaching every corner of the marble hall. "That's how long you thought you had control." The manager stumbled backward, his confidence finally cracking. "What are you talking about?" But everyone else in the lobby already sensed the truth. His reign was seconds from collapse. The lobby fell into a silence so sharp it felt like glass. Every eye clung to the woman on the staircase. Her calm figure stood against the glow of the chandelier, radiating quiet command. The guards at the base of the steps remained motionless, waiting. The manager's voice cracked as he tried again to assert himself. This is nonsense. She doesn't belong here. You're both wasting your time." His words, once sharp like a whip, now sounded pitiful. Brittle Dot, the woman, descended slowly, her heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble. With every step, the whispers grew louder. Guests craned their necks, staff shifted nervously, and the receptionist nearly dropped her pen. When she reached the bottom, the guard stepped aside respectfully. One murmured, "Ma'am," with a nod. The manager's jaw dropped. "Ma'am? What do you mean, ma'am?" She turned to face him, her eyes steady. "I gave this hotel 10 years of my life. I built it from the ground up. Every detail, every stone, every design, choice mine. And yet, tonight, you tried to deny me entry into my own home." Gasps tore through the lobby. A woman in pearls clutched her chest. A businessman muttered, She's the owner?" The young receptionist covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. The bellboys exchanged looks of stunned realization. The staff, once hiding behind the manager's arrogance, suddenly looked exposed naked in their silence. The manager staggered back a step. His face, once smug and flushed with power, now looked pale and uncertain. You're lying. I know the owner. She cut him off with a calm, firm voice. He is me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek black folder embossed with the hotel's golden crest. With a deliberate motion, she opened it and laid the papers on the front desk. Ownership documents, signed and sealed, gleamed under the lobby lights. The staff leaned closer, eyes wide. There it was. Her name, her signature. Proof undeniable. The older man with the cane let out a deep chuckle from the corner. Poetic justice, he murmured. The house always knows its master. The manager's mouth opened and closed, words failing him. Sweat poured down his temples. He looked at the staff for support, but none stepped forward. Instead, they avoided his gaze, their faces tight with guilt. The black woman turned to them, her voice carrying dignity rather than rage. Each of you had a choice tonight, to stand against arrogance or to remain silent. Silence may feel safe, but it speaks louder than words. The receptionist's eyes welled with tears. I wanted to tell him, but I was afraid. Fear is not an excuse, the woman said gently but firmly. I know. I've lived with fear my whole life. But tonight, your silence told me where you stand. The crowd shifted, the weight of her words pressing on every chest. The manager, desperate, raised his voice. This doesn't change anything. You can't fire me without cause? She cut in. You denied me entry into my own hotel. You insulted me in front of my guests. You humiliated me because of the color of my skin. Her calm broke, just for a moment, her voice ringing with fire. That is cause enough. The guards moved closer. The guests whispered in awe. The staff stared, frozen. The woman straightened her shoulders, her eyes hard as marble. Consider this your last night here. You and everyone who stood with you. Gasps erupted once more. The air seemed to vibrate. The manager stumbled back, his world crumbling. You can't do this, he shouted, but even his own voice betrayed him. It sounded small, pathetic, and powerless. The woman looked around the lobby one final time. 9 minutes ago, you thought I was beneath you. Tonight, you will learn who really holds the keys to this place. The chandelier lights glittered like stars above her head. And in that moment, the lobby didn't just belong to her, it was her dot, and the man who once strutted across it like a king now looked like nothing more than a trespasser. Lobby had turned into a courtroom without walls. Guests sat on the edges of their seats, staff stood rigid as statues, and the manager, once swaggering with arrogance, now looked like a man, waiting for his sentence. The black woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Authority radiated from her calm posture, her words falling like hammers on stone. She turned first to the receptionist, the young woman whose trembling hands had betrayed her fear earlier. Tell me, the owner said, her voice even. When I asked for a room, what did you tell me? The receptionist's lips quivered. I said that we had no rooms available. And was that true? The owner pressed. Tears brimmed in the receptionist's eyes. She shook her head slowly. No, ma'am. We had plenty of rooms. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A guest at the bar muttered, she lied. Under his orders, the owner nodded once. And why did you lie? The receptionist broke, her tears spilling. Because I was afraid of him. He told me never to give rooms to. She stopped herself, choking on the word. The owner's expression softened only slightly. Fear explains your choice, but it does not erase it. You chose silence. You chose compliance. And tonight, that choice costs you your place here. The receptionist collapsed into sobs as one of the guards stepped forward. Please, she whispered, but the guard gently led her aside. The guests watched in silence. No one spoke against the judgment. The owner turned next to the bellboys. "You," she said. "What did you see?" One swallowed hard. "Everything, ma'am." "We saw it all. And what did you do?" The bellboys looked at each other, guilt heavy on their young faces. "Nothing." The owner's voice hardened. "Exactly. You stood silent while arrogance mocked dignity in front of you. That silence is complicity." The bellboys lowered their heads. They, too, were dismissed. Whispers swirled faster now. Guests leaned in, whispering phrases like, "She's cleansing the place and this is justice." Finally, the owner turned to the manager, the man whose arrogance had sparked this downfall. He tried to stand tall, but his shoulders sagged, his tie loosened, his face pale. "You," she said, her voice cutting like glass. "You are the root of this rot. For years I entrusted this place to leaders who would uphold dignity. Instead, you turned it into a stage for your ego." The manager's lips trembled. I was only following standard procedure." She cut him off, her tone rising for the first time. "Do not dare twist cowardice into policy. You humiliated me, the owner of this building, in front of my guests. You disrespected my skin, my presence, my existence, and in doing so, you disrespected this hotel itself." The guests erupted in applause, spontaneous and raw. Some stood, clapping louder, their cheers filling the marble chamber. The manager's eyes darted wildly, his world collapsing in front of strangers who had once looked up to him as an authority. Older man with the cane lifted it high and tapped it against the floor. "Justice!" He shouted, and the words spread through the crowd like fire. "Justice!" The manager dropped to his knees. "Please," he begged, "don't end me like this. I can change." But the owner shook her head slowly. "You had your chance. Tonight, the staff you poisoned with arrogance will remember your fall. And tomorrow, this place will rise again, clean of your shadow." The guards moved in. The manager struggled, flailing, his voice breaking into shrieks. "No, you need me. You can't run this place without me." But his words rang hollow, drowned by the applause of the guests and the firm footsteps of the guards dragging him away. As the doors shut behind him, silence fell again. All eyes turned back to the woman, the rightful owner, who now stood alone at the center of the marble lobby. She took a breath, her voice carrying like the chime of a bell. This hotel was built on dignity. Tonight, dignity returns. Those who stood in silence have no place here. Those who mocked it are gone. And those who honor it will stay. The applause thundered again, echoing off the chandeliers. For the first time that night, the building itself seemed to exhale, cleansed of its arrogance, and in the middle of it all, the owner's calm smile returned not of triumph, but of justice fulfilled. The echo of the slammed doors still lingered when the applause faded into a hushed reverence. The marble lobby, moments ago thick with arrogance and fear, now felt transformed. It was no longer just a building of glass and stone, it had become a stage for justice. The black woman, standing tall at the center, let the silence settle. Her calm gaze swept over the guests, the staff who remained, and the chandeliers glittering above like stars over a courtroom. She began slowly, each word deliberate. 9 minutes ago, I was told I didn't belong in my own hotel. Not because of policy, not because of truth, but because arrogance and prejudice blinded the very people entrusted with its care. The guests leaned forward. Some clutched their glasses tighter, some blinked back tears. She continued, her voice rising with quiet fire. "This is not just about me. It is about every person who has ever been told they do not belong. About every door slammed, every lie told, every silence chosen instead of courage. Tonight we end that silence." The older man with the cane smiled faintly, nodding as if he had waited years to hear such words spoken aloud. The owner turned to the remaining. staff the few who had neither mocked her nor joined in the cruelty. To those who stood frozen, I offer you a choice. Stand with dignity or stand aside. This hotel will not tolerate arrogance disguised as authority, or silence disguised as safety. A housekeeper in a neat uniform stepped forward, her hands trembling but her chin high. Ma'am, I've worked here 12 years. I've seen what's been done in silence. But I'll stand with you. From tonight forward, the owner nodded, her eyes softening. Then you stay, and you help rebuild? Applause broke again, this time warmer, less frantic, like an embrace from the crowd. A businessman in the corner called out, Ma'am, we'll be telling this story for years. What you did tonight, it's history. But she shook her head gently. History is not made in one night. It is made in every moment we choose dignity over arrogance, courage over silence. This is only the beginning. She moved toward the front desk, her hand brushing across the polished marble as though reclaiming every inch of it. Then, with a steady gesture, she picked up the guest ledger and placed it in front of the stunned clerk. This hotel, she said, will no longer be a place where people wonder if they belong. It will be a place where they know they do. The words settled like a vow etched in stone. From the balcony above, a child's voice rang out. She's the boss. The innocent cry sent laughter rippling through the crowd light. Genuine, healing. Even the chandeliers seemed to shine brighter. The manager's absence was a hole no one mourned. His arrogance had collapsed like a house of cards, swept away by the simple, unshakable dignity of the woman he tried to belittle. The owner straightened her shoulders. Tonight, justice was served. Tomorrow change begins. Let it be known that in this house, respect is not negotiable. The guests rose to their feet, clapping louder and louder until the sound filled every corner. Some cheered, some whistled, some shouted words like bravo and justice. For the first time that evening, the woman allowed herself a real smile. Not smug, not vengeful, but proud. As the applause thundered, she walked to the grand entrance, her suitcase rolling quietly beside her. She paused, turning once more to the crowd. Remember this, she said softly, but her voice carried. The walls of a building can stand tall, but it is the people inside who decide if it stands with dignity. Do not forget what you saw here tonight. And with that, she stepped through the grand doors, the night air rushing in to greet her. The lobby behind her buzzed with awe, whispers, and newfound resolve. Outside, the city lights glimmered like promises waiting to be kept. The hotel had been cleansed. A new dawn had begun.